at your balance sheet lately? I'm asking for a friend. Seriously, the numbers are truly staggering if you itemize them. But in short, they say this: you're totally and irrevocably screwed. You are officially the worst debtor nation in this undistinguished history of this wretched world. Congratulations on your self-imposed slavery. Take a bow. Better yet, on your knees. You might as well start practicing now. Allow me to share the actual numbers with you, if only because it will be yet another worthwhile reminder of how truly awesome I am, and how truly toast you are. At the time I was writing this, your national debt was $18 trillion. To put that astronomical number in perspective, if you spent just $1 per day, every day, since the carpenter was born more than 2,000 years ago, you wouldn't have spent $1 trillion by now, let alone 18. In fact, you'd still be 300 billion short of that. If your national debt were laid out in a single file line of $1 bills, it would stretch from your planet all the way past Uranus. Obviously, there's a joke there, and the joke is on you. By the way, the planet Uranus is almost 2 billion miles away. Good thing for us, there's plenty of your anuses running your government right here at home. Can I get a laugh out there? Fucking meatbags. Your debt is 103% of your gross domestic product. I won't explain to you what GDP means because we made you too stupid to figure that out. And 540% of your annual federal revenues. This means the most valuable asset in your economy, by far with no close second, is your debt. Every American household, on average, is on the hook for 148,000 of that, and only about 5% of American households make that much money annually as it is. This doesn't even count the over 128 trillion in unfunded mandates and liabilities your government will need to fully fund the welfare state and your so-called entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's 34 trillion more than the total net worth of your country. To put that number in perspective, there isn't another nation on Earth whose total net worth is as high as your current cash flow deficit. Every household in America would need to pay an additional $580,000 to cover that shortfall, and only 1% of American households bring home that kind of bacon. By 2025, the interest alone on all your debt will balloon to $785 billion. That is roughly the cost of your entire Social Security program at the moment. If the interest you owe on your debt were its own economy, it would be the 28th richest nation in the world, richer than the Philippines, South Africa, Iraq, Belgium, Switzerland, and Sweden, just to name a few. And you show no signs of slowing your roll. In the past 6 years, you've accumulated $7.5 trillion in debt, which is as much debt as you accumulated combined in your first 228 years of existence. There are currently more Americans on food stamps than the total population of Spain. As if all that dread weren't enough, I haven't even shared with you my absolutely favorite stat yet. Communist China, the only nation on Earth that comes close to being able to challenge you economically and militarily, owns 1.3 trillion of your foreign debt because nothing says stupid like making your adversary your landlord. And while you're at it, stop by the gas station and fill her up again. All those who wish to conquer you in the name of Allah, thank you. And so do I. It turns out, the decadence we offered you that you now enjoy came with a price tag after all. Santa charged his goodie bag to your credit card. You should have listened to your elders and those crusty old conservatives when they warned you there's no such thing as a free lunch. But once you fully embraced the decadence of your new normal, and many of your bad decisions became incentivized, thus freeing you from their immediate consequences, someone still had to pay for the collateral damage of violating the natural laws of you-know-who. You may naively think your entitlements are free, but the meter's been running this entire time with compounding interest. There are currently 148 million Americans collecting entitlement checks of some sort from the US taxpayer, but there are only 86 million taxpayers working in the private sector paying into the system. Government workers are, at best, a revenue-neutral transaction. They pay taxes, but the taxes from the private sector pays for their jobs. That means there are 70% more tax takers than taxpayers. The outlook here continues to be bleak. Right now, almost 93 million Americans are out of work. That is a staggering number. To hammer home to you just how staggering, consider that if you're unemployed with their own country, they would be the 15th most populous nation on Earth, bigger than Egypt, France, Italy, and even the United Kingdom. Wait a second. It just dawned on me. You probably don't know much of anything at all about those natural laws I just referenced, do you? Of course you don't. Because we made sure to remove all that information from your schools. More on that later. In the meantime, that means almost all of you reading this really have no idea whatsoever how this planet works. You're literally the blind leading the blind. This also means you really aren't fully aware of what we've done to you. And if you aren't fully aware of what we've done to you, then that steals at least some of my joy watching you circle the drain. I suppose since your fate is sealed, I can go ahead and let you in on what the generations who founded and built your country understood and submitted to, but which you're either ignorant of or hostile to. It's just too much fun to pass on revealing to you one of the basic fundamentals of your existence that would have preserved your freedom if only you had heard and obeyed. See, our deadbeat dad cares enough about you to tell you no, the same way an earthly parent tells a child not to play in traffic, touch a hot stove, or stick his tongue in the electrical outlet. When your progenitors chose the ways of my master long ago and disobeyed our deadbeat dad in the process, they cursed all of their future offspring with a defiant spirit. As a result, it is not natural for you to do what our deadbeat dad says is right. Instead, you often crave what he says is wrong. You'll even kill each other for it. Would you like to know what it looks like when nobody tells you no? then look no further than Detroit. Flashback to the 1950s, when Detroit was the wealthiest city in America. But that is before it decided it could say yes to everything, and nobody and nothing was worthy of saying no to. Now, the city owes over 100,000 creditors and has filed for bankruptcy. It's home to over 70 hazardous waste dumps. Its population is the lowest it's been since before Henry Ford invented the assembly line. It lost 25% of its population in the last census alone. It has over 78,000 abandoned homes, which is more abandoned homes than the second largest city in Montana has people. Almost half the city's residents are illiterate. Roughly 60% of the city's children live in poverty. The violent crime rate is 5 times the national average. Only 7% of the city's 8th graders are reading proficient. The city has less than 10% of the manufacturing jobs it had 50 years ago. 1 of every 3 pregnancies ends with a mom killing her unborn child. Thanks to your belief in your basic goodness, which comes right from my master's encouragement that you can be like you know who if you followed your own instincts and not his instructions. You have become the worst evil ever unleashed upon the creation. Detroit is living proof of this. Honestly, and as a demon, I don't use that word often. Your capacity for evil rivals even our own. That's a compliment, by the way. Seriously, there are times when your species take our wicked hints and suggestions and carry them to lengths not even I, the elite demon general in all of hell, have contrived yet. Pro tip: it's not really the devil made me do it as much as it's the devil helped me do it. Because you really wanted to do it all along. We can't make you do anything. We can't even materialize a temporal form of our own, which is why at times we've had to possess yours. We're more like the frosting on your cake. We're merely the additive, not the recipe. Even if we weren't here at all, you'd still be damned all on your own. You already started the fire. We just add lighter fluid, or as we like to say down here, more cowbell. But the sentimental sap known as your creator isn't content to leave well enough alone. So, just as he sent the carpenter to take the punishment all of you reading this so richly deserve upon himself, he established basic parameters of justice within the creation itself to incentivize right behavior and discourage our or your preferred behavior. These parameters have been known by different names throughout the ages, but in your nation's history, they became known as the laws of nature and of nature's God, often referred to as natural law for short. It basically means heaven's honor code. Despite all your scornful mocking and disobedience, our deadbeat dad still doesn't want you to destroy yourselves. So, he ordained this natural law as a system of good consequences for doing what's good for you, and bad consequences for doing what's bad for you. Take all of your red ink I just laid out as an example. That's there because you keep trying to use government to do the things that natural law doesn't permit it to do. You know who established 4 spheres of authority to maintain order in your fallen world: self, family, church, and state government. Each of them has their own distinct jurisdictions, but are simultaneously under the authority of the natural law. Whenever you bags of meat try to move the spheres out of their divinely ordained jurisdictions, 10 tyranny happens, and there are few greater tyrannies for a people than debt. Repeatedly, you are asking the state, government, to operate in the spheres that traditionally belonged to the family, government acting as a surrogate father or husband, and or the church, government acting as an agent of compassion and charity. You know who intended the state's primary jurisdiction to be the promotion of good by punishing evil. The state is to be the instrument of justice against all enemies of the natural law, both foreign, invading armies, and domestic, transgressors against the natural law or criminals. These repeated violations of the natural law are the reason for all this debt you currently have. Did you know that only 29% of your budget is what's called discretionary spending? The budget for your military, which is government's most basic necessity according to the natural law, is 55% of that. That sounds like a lot, until you realize the other 2/3 of your budget is called mandatory spending, and about 90% of that is your welfare state entitlement spending. By 2024, should you last that long, and I have my doubts, that welfare state entitlement spending is projected to be 85% of your spending growth. So even if you eliminated your entire military altogether, you'd barely put a dent in your debt. Your attempts to impose charity, which by definition is voluntary and therefore cannot be imposed via the secular state instead of the family and the church, are literally killing you. It can't possibly work because our dear old dad wants his creatures to know where mercy and charity truly comes from. His love for you and your love for one another. He will not allow any government, especially one following our lead in erasing his name and word from public view, to prosper against the divine plan. The more you foolishly try, the more in debt you become. However, thanks to our propaganda as well as your own selfish desires, you don't see it that way. You see his natural laws as a hindrance to your self-actualization, not as a hedge of protection. With a subtle nudge from us, you have broken free of the shackles of his divine blessing and guidance, and became our ball and chain instead. Case in point, several years ago, there was a judge from down south somewhere. I forget the place. No, it wasn't Texas, although I hate that place. That's right. It was Alabama. He simply wanted to post the 10 Commandments at his courthouse, just as they've been displayed in the U.S. Supreme Court building all along, and were also originally omnipresent in every public building from coast to coast in your history. Of course, we got our people on it right away. Lawsuits were filed. Threats were made. You know the drill by now. Yet, he was unlike most of your effeminate bureaucrats you call public officials. He actually called our bluff and dared to say the emperor has no clothes, that our people really didn't have any power to do anything about it. Which is true, but that's not important now. And we're all hat and no cattle. Thankfully, my master was vacationing in Pyongyang while this was transpiring, because I will confess, that's the last time I thought there was any chance at all our plan would fail. And as you know, my master doesn't take too kindly to even potential failure. Understand that if this one Alabama judge were allowed to call our bluff, and our hand was revealed to be a deuce, 7 offsuit and no pocket aces, it would encourage an entire movement of like-minded men and women to finally find their courage after all these years. Without the courts, most of our greatest schemes are up in smoke. fear and intimidation are our biggest weapons. Therefore, we had to maintain the pernicious lie that once some unelected judges has spoken, that's now the law of the land, no matter how lawless it is. Frankly, it's the tactical linchpin to the whole plan. It's always easier and more effective for us to infiltrate the elite classes and have them be the ones who impose chaos on the masses from on high. It's when the masses take control of their fate, just as your founding fathers did, that we're on the defensive. Does not that dreadful book say something about when the righteous rule, the people rejoice, and a triple-braided cord is tougher to break? I'm getting a lump in my chest just remembering those nerve-wracking days. Even when he's on sabbatical, my master likes to stay informed. So, I was still to report to him daily about how the plan to take you down was proceeding. Had he known then of this threat, who knows how severely I would have been punished. Disembowelment might have been lenient. That's why I had to lie to him. See no good, hear no good is what I reported to him each day. Right now, you're probably wondering why I would openly admit in print that I lied to my master, and am I not afraid of retribution for doing so? Remember, my master had to approve this manuscript before you read it, so he already knows that I lied to him. However, since I lied to him and used that to buy myself the time it took to devise a way to keep the plan on track, I received a commendation for original thinking from my master. Nevertheless, at the time, I ain't too proud to admit, I was scrambling. We threw everything but the kitchen sink at this Alabama judge, and he wasn't wavering. His boldness was starting to become a national story now, and many folks in your ranks who had embraced defeatism were starting to get inspired. There was even talk of your conservative movement lining up behind this judge and urging the President of the United States from the same political party to stand with him and use this as a galvanizing moment for patriots across the country. That absolutely could not fucking happen. Thankfully, we had one or two key people on the inside that convinced a few others if the president of this judge standing up to our big lie was allowed to stand, then you folks were going to demand similar boldness from the rest of your governing class in the future once this example was set. And that boldness can come with a steep price, including the loss of their major fundraising streams and even their elected offices. If there's one constant in the universe, it's the fecklessness of a politician. Better for one man to die than for our whole nation see that ass scam to perish is still one of my favorite lines in that dusty Bible most of you rarely read. Thus, I played our tried and true trump card once more, and it came up aces. Even some of the judge's fellow Christian conservative legal beagles openly turned on him, and they kneecapped him for us in broad daylight, Luca Brasi style, all to preserve their lives of luxury and non-confrontation in the name of Jesus, of course. Damn. And I mean, damn. I need a cigarette after witnessing your species' depravity like that. It's moments like those that almost make me regret having to torment your species for eternity once you arrive down here. Note that I said, almost. Don't get me wrong. As I wrote before, we demons get off on your blood-curdling screams and pleas for mercy when none is forthcoming. But truly, there are some among your species that could even teach a demon a thing or two about treachery. Sometimes even we demons of hell had to give you bags of meat, your props, as your kids say today. I'll tell you what, I'm not totally devoid of compassion. So if any of those tremendously clutch traitors decide not to repent between now and when they assume room temperature, I'll petition my master to permit them the eternal equivalent of one of your days of forbearance of torment. Of course, we're a stickler for rules down here, so if that forbearance is granted, that means double the torment the next day to make up for it. But it's the least I can do since several of those modern-day Caiaphases literally saved my scaly bacon. There. Never let it be said I've never performed a good deed in my life. Now get off my fucking lawn. Once this potential insurgency was put down by people supposedly on your side, no less, there was literally no line of defense remaining between you and us. Sure, you have some of your politicians and bloggers urging that stance be taken again, and that same Alabama judge is even back in power as well. But while any attempt at righteousness, no matter how trivial, annoys us, these efforts at restoring the natural law of you-know-who into a place of prominence within your society are little more than pesky gnats. They're going to go nowhere because you're too far gone now. Which is why I have no qualms at all about openly discussing all of this. Even many of you reading this that have the right worldview falsely believe you can only fight to the extent public opinion allows, instead of boldly working to mold, shape, and change public opinion. You may still cling to all that high and mighty God talk, but you don't really mean it. Rather than risk his wrath by obeying him instead of us, you will bow the knee to Baal at the altar of manipulated public opinions just the same. Better yet, you'll completely bastardize a few verses from that dreadful book and club your own would-be heroes of history over their head with them. Hell, nowadays, you're practically better at crushing your team's morale than we are. I mean, you wouldn't want to be one of those radicals, would you? Funny thing is, those discredited radicals are always the ones that change history. John the Baptist to anyone. Thankfully, you're too driven by your own comfort to remember that. Case in point, the past few years, we have intercepted many promising, for us, conversations among the generations of older men in position of leadership. In the past eras, these aging movers and shakers would be concerned about their legacy, and at this stage of their lives, looking to actively groom the leaders who would pick up their mantle. Except all too often, they are not. Many of your churches have no heir apparent waiting in the wings, and then slowly wither away and die once the lead pastor retires or assumes room temperature. In your political circles, we have repeatedly seen the older, more complacent men look to stifle and shun their younger, more aggressive peers. They even chastise the younger men for being obstructionist or out of the mainstream, all because they seek to confront and defeat our schemes rather than placate or regulate them. Do the brash younger men need training, honing, and disciplining to fulfill their calling? Absolutely, and the older generation of men could provide that. Yet they not only frequently pass on doing so, But they go even further by trying to snuff out the spark, passion, purpose the younger men were divinely given for such a time as this. Who knows why? Perhaps it's because they see the younger man's warrior spirit as an indictment of their generational failure, and they don't want to be reminded of such. Perhaps it's something else entirely. Regardless of the motivation, the results are the same. You have a tendency to take out our potential threats before we have to. That's why we don't have anything to worry about. Let's face it, most of you aren't even going to bother reading the rest of this book because it's way too over the top at this point to be true. So you'll pick up the remote and seek out a little reality instead, like sister wives, because nothing says reality like a total goofball getting multiple women to do his bidding for him in the laundry and kitchen on national television. All the while, he takes turns with them in the bedroom. Yeah, sure, that happens in real life. You might as well watch another paternity test marathon of Maury Povich show reruns while you're at it. You may doubt that what I'm telling you is real, but the consequences for your doubt and disobedience of his natural laws are very, very real. All the goodies promised to you from your government are not free. That's why you're so in debt. All the guiltless pleasures we tempt you with are not free either. For example, much of the porn most consenting adults consume came at the high price of human trafficking. But there's no need for you to worry about all that right now. For now, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. You don't have to worry about paying back that debt until you're down here. But you should know that down here, payback's a bitch, and she has a very nasty bite. For some of you reading this, that's still a long ways off. For others, it could be as soon as tomorrow. But one thing is for certain in hell. You can check in anytime you like. But you can never leave.